Hello everybody, and we're going to be analyzing a game between Magnus Carlsen and Hikaru Nakamura with the game yesterday. So we got Hikaru Nakamura with the white pieces and Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. And now what are we waiting for? Let's start. We got d4, which is a defensive line for Hikaru Nakamura, and then d5 playing symmetrically with d5, and then knight to f3, developing a knight and taking more squares at the center. We got Magnus Carlsen doing the same but with the black pieces, and we got bishop to g5 attacking the knight on f6, and then we got knight to e4 attacking the bishop on g5. And this knight is very powerful right now, and this bishop needs to move. We got bishop to f4, which is a reasonable square, which it still can move so many squares, so it is a good benefit. Pawn to c5 attacking the pawn on d4, and then pawn to e3 attacking the pawn, defending the pawn on d4. And if black takes the pawn on d4, well, it will simply just take an open kind of the position for him. So Magnus Carlsen doesn't do that. Instead, develops the knight on c6, which literally makes his knight active and makes one more piece active. We got knight to d2 attacking the powerful knight on e4, and also developing to and also maybe controlling more squares at the center. We got bishop to f5, controlling more squares at the center and also developing, and we got pawn to c3, supporting the pawn on d4 more, so that if the black pawn takes again, this time he will take with the c pawn, so that the pawns will centralize if black takes that pawn. And we got to this position where Magnus Carlsen made an inaccuracy. I don't know why it's an inaccuracy. Maybe it's a computer saying so, or maybe something else. We got queen to b3, pressuring the pawn on b7, and black has to defend that pawn right now. And so he did with the queen to d7. And right now, you cannot defend with pawn to b6 by defending it with another pawn, because of the fact that white will just pin it, and now the knight is unable to move anywhere, because if the knight were to move anywhere like this move, the king will be taken. And we got, but that didn't happen, so we got queen to d7 defending the pawn on b7, and we got takes with the king. Because if the knight takes the knight, then what will happen? It doesn't guard this square, and if it doesn't guard that square right over there, we got this position where black can attack the bishop on b5, and then the bishop has to move back, and then we got this, and then this, and then after that, pawn to b5 can be played. And now these pawns are super annoying. Instead, takes with the king, which is a very weird move, but literally it has some purpose in it, because of the fact if pawn to a6 now, we got knight to e5 attacking the queen has to move, and if knight to e5 were to happen, then knight to e5 taking the knight on e5, and the bishop can just take the queen. So this knight to e5 is very useful and also attacks the queen, which means you cannot just take the bishop, so the queen has to move back, and this will be traded soon, and we got to this position where the queen is very powerful. So this is knight to e5 and what it does, and it is very powerful. But Magnus Carlsen doesn't go pawn to a6, he goes pawn to f6, maybe supporting the pawn going to e5. We got queen to a4, pinning the knight more and pressuring the knight more. We got two pieces now attacking the knight on c6, rook to c8, defending the knight more on c6, and we got pawn to c5, taking the knight on the free pawn on c5. We got pawn to e5, bishop back to g3. By the way, rook to c8 here is an option, because literally if it doesn't move, if the rook doesn't move right away, if the rook doesn't move, if a6 were to happen right away, then if the bishop doesn't move right away, then rook to d1 will happen and just develop a rook. And if the bishop takes, the queen will just take the rook. So here you go. So the rook needs to move in order to use this. The next move is played with an inaccuracy. We got pawn to e5 attacking the bishop on f4, and then goes back to g3. It needs to go back and kind of undevelops because it has now one square, and this bishop is not too powerful anymore. We got rook to d1, maybe manually castling here. We got pawn to a6, attacking the bishop on b5. The bishop needs to move, and if this time the bishop doesn't move, takes would be just a full blunder because the rook is not on a8 anymore. We got bishop to e2 going back from the danger of the a6 pawn, and we got knight to e7, queen takes d7, and then black takes the queen. We got the bishop undeveloping to the d7 square. We got king to e1, finally manually castling with an attack on the d5 pawn, and we got bishop e6 trying to develop another bishop, pawn to h3 played side. We got king to f7, knight to d2, and then pawn to h5 attacking here, and also preventing the white bishop from going to g4. And we got rook to c1, knight to f5, trying to attack the bishop here. The bishop needs to go back, bishop to h2, knight to d6 going back. Some future later, maybe it will go forward again, but this time with better squares to go on in the future. We got bishop to f3, which develops a bishop again, and we got pawn to g5. By the way, look at these pawns. These pawns are gonna explode the white side because it is going to advance some time here. We got knight to b3 going to make the knight more active and also attacking the bishop. We got knight to e4, defends the bishop on c5 because now if white takes, it will just be a trade. And we got that exact same sequence but with the rook taking. And now we got pawn to c4, pawn to g4, and then we got pawn to d5. Now we have this big trade because of the fact that the pawn is attacking the bishop. These two rooks are staring at each other, and we got maybe this bishop is being attacked by the g4 pawn, and we got to this big trade which the king has to take because of check. And now Hikaru Nakamura wins a pawn, and then rook to c1, and then rook to c1 taking the rook on c1. And this bishop is kind of free now because in the last couple of moves, and this bishop is still active here and is not kind of free yet because of the fact of this pawn right here. It cannot go here and try to be active. It cannot go even here too because of the fact these pawns are blocking the activation of the bishop. This bishop right now is being reservable, but pawn to f4 is a nice move here because if pawn to f4 was played here, like a random move were to happen, we got to this, and this bishop will become powerful next, but that didn't happen. Instead, we got knight to g5, going away with a knight with black, and we got this knight takes h3. Okay, Magnus Carlsen took the free pawn, but Magnus Carlsen literally trapped his own knight because of the fact that pawn to f4 literally makes the knight not go to the g5 square, and that is the only square it can escape to. It cannot go anywhere now. This knight is kind of trapped. If it goes anywhere, it's going to be taken by the bishop or by these pawns right here, and the knight is simply trapped. We got pawn to e4. The king is going to come here and kill the knight right away. We got rook to g8, preventing that because if the king goes here now, the rook will just take it. We got rook to c5, and then pawn to f5, rook to e5. You cannot take the rook because of the pawn. We got king to f6, bishop to g3, maybe looking for options to move the bishop soon, and also to make the king go to g2 square and also take the knight. And we got rook to g4, but we got rook to e8. But if king to g2 now, then we have this knight sacrifice, which if white takes, pawn to h4 is played, and you cannot move the bishop because if you move the bishop somewhere, then the king will be taken. And also, if you move to the king anywhere, it's going to be taken anyway. The bishop is going to be taken. So this knight sacrifice has something to do with it. So the king doesn't just take the knight because of the fact it can be sacrificed, and if this happens, the bishop will be taken. So that's the knight sacrifice for you. We got h4, bishop to h2, king to g6, and then rook to h8, attacking the pawn on h4. We got king to g7, kicking the rook out of this square right here. We got rook to b8, trying to take the pawn on b7, and we got pawn to b5, escaping from the attack of the rook. We got rook to b7, king to g6, and then white wins another pawn. We got rook to a6, winning another pawn. We got rook to g7, rook to f6, king to g4, king to g2, and then we got this knight sacrifice. Sorry for the exaggeration of colors on the board, by the way. I don't know why I did that. I don't know. I just got bored. You see? Now, if king takes, and if the king takes, this bishop is kind of miserable because after bishop to g1, rook to g2, king to f1, rook to b2, taking another free pawn, this bishop cannot move anywhere. This bishop is going to become miserable because of the fact that these pawns are blocking the bishop. This is a trap. This is a blunder to the king. And this is just nothing. Just attacks the pawn, but it's defended by the king. And if this, then that's nothing because of the rook. And maybe it will be pinned soon. And king to f3 happened. We got king to f3, bishop to h4, and then we got king to rook to b1. It is not checkmate because of the fact that the bishop can just cover the square, and if this bishop wasn't here, then this would be checkmate because the king has no squares to move. But the bishop is there, so bishop to e1 is played, blocking the check, and we got king to takes e3, rook b6, but it's defended. So we got king to f3, and then we got to this position where we trade more pawns, and yeah. Also, by the way, Hikaru Nakamura is losing by this position because of the fact that Magnus Carlsen had took another pawn, and these pawns are kind of queening, and even though Hikaru Nakamura has +1 pawn, how are you gonna stop these pawns? And this bishop is miserable right now. This bishop cannot do anything because of the fact that the rook is spinning the bishop, and if the bishop moves, the king will be taken on f1. So we got rook to h4, and then we got to this position where Magnus Carlsen was able to queen in the endgame. But it didn't happen because literally Hikaru resigned. But in this position, if king takes f2, we got queen to b1, which literally is a check to the king, and you cannot take the queen because it's on check, and the king has to move somewhere. Black is the verge on simply of checkmating. Rook to b3 happened. We got rook to a1, trying to check the white king, and because if pawn to b1, then the rook can just take the rook, and it will be maybe a draw. But and so rook to a1, king takes f2, queen, the pawn queens on b1, and we got rook takes queen, rook takes rook, and we got to this position. And I think you know now that Magnus Carlsen can just checkmate with the king and the rook. If you don't know how, you can search on YouTube. Not. I wouldn't explain to you now because it's all about the competition, not the checkmate patterns. I don't know. Yeah, I think this is just the last game and the first game that I'm just gonna be analyzing. I hope you enjoyed the video. By the way, such a good game by Magnus Carlsen. Maybe ongoing to beat Ding someday. If that happens, I don't know. This is the end of the video. See you guys in the next video. Please sub and like and press the notification bell so that it's going to notify you every time I upload. And yeah, see you guys in the next video. Peace out.